Hey everybody, Riot Mort back, and 2022 is officially over. We did it. We're through. We're on our winter break, totally goofing off, not playing way too much TFT, and definitely doing other things with our time. And I am joined by two very special guests. One we don't get to talk to very often, and then another who's kind of new around here. So first off, Witty, welcome back. How are you?
Good. Having a good break and playing a lot of TFT.
So, in case this is anyone's first video, Witty, why don't you introduce yourself and what you do? Because apparently you're new to the team or something.
Yeah, so I'm Wittrock, also go by Witty. I've been on the TFT team kind of its entire life since February 2019, and I work on sets. So I've led a variety of sets and kind of do a lot of champion trait content, set mechanic, kind of the earlier bits, whereas Mort is more focused on kind of the later bits and the live experience. So.
Sweet. So yeah, this is you and I's third year in review, Witty. So we've been doing this a while. But joining us is someone who's pretty new. Alex, why don't you say hi?
Hello, I'm Alex. I'm the product lead for gameplay. So that is the team that works with Mort and Kent on live, works with Witty and all the designers and all the different sets we're putting out. And we also oversee Hyperroll and Double Up now. So pretty hyped to have those modes part of the team. So yeah, and I've been on TFT for about almost a year now. So right before Set 7 launched is when I joined.
Yeah, we'll get to it in the year in review, and we get to your month where it's like, oh, and Alex joined. Sweet, that was helpful. Alex is really cool here because he gives us insight to stuff like the art and engineering and QA and stuff like that. Because I think Witty and I sometimes make things a little design centric, so Alex will be a good counterbalance. So
Yeah, I work at things more holistically across the team. So Mort and Witty will give you the deep design, and then I'll try to offer more perspective on what else is going on. Oops.
true, true. Plus, you're better at the like wide angle, whereas I'm too busy focused on tiny little details. And yeah. All right, so 2022. Can you believe a year ago, January 2022, people were still playing Gizmos and Gadgets? That's how long ago. Like TFT warps our perception of time. It really
Yeah,
does.
that feels like an impossibly long time ago. I mean, actually, I don't even remember. Was the mid set even out?
Nope. Nope, we're gonna talk
Okay,
about that later. So they're still playing
goodness.
six. They're still playing Gizmos and Gadgets.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so like Giovanni had left, he's on to the MMO. Um the team like Linda is working on the mid set for Gizmos and Gadgets, and we're doing live patches. I think in this general area you can see on the nerf list we're dealing with like Galio, Kaisa, Morello. This was, GA Kaisa Morello was the thing that kind of ruined Christmas break last year. There's always
I remember
something.
that.
Yeah, yeah, you must say you remember that part. So yeah, but again, feels like a long time ago. It was still a really good set, though, despite all that. At least it was a fun 5 cost. But man, those late games were a little bit of a terror. So
I remember really playing a lot on mobile over the break and kind of having some like mobile notes and then thinking a lot about augments at the time because that we had a couple of months to really get to see how that system was playing out. And at that point I remember we were like still very positive on it. And I
yep,
don't remember if we had made the call to carry it over into 7, but like we were pretty sure we were going to carry it over.
yep, yep. Cool. So jumping to 12.2. So again, still in Gizmos and Gadgets terms, this is where we're adjusting things like Bodyguard. There's one big change I wanted to highlight here because I think it was one of the best changes we'd made. This was Portable Forge to Gold Augment. It took, that
Wow.
was, yeah, exactly. It used to be prismatic. We brought it down to gold. Clearly, it was overpowered at first, but as far as fun factor goes, to this day, it still remains the most picked augment in the game. So clearly, giving some more accessibility to that very fun augment and that very fun system is something that has done some good in the long term. So
This was also, and we had been doing this for a little while, but and augments help this a lot, is us carrying old pieces of former sets or set
yep,
mechanics into future sets. And I mean, obviously, Portable Forges worked out really well, Orn from 4.5, but we just keep doing it because it just keeps working well and allows us to kind of have a lot of content variety in a very not a hidden way, but like you don't experience it every game, and so it's much more special when you do get to experience it.
Yep.
Yeah, I
So
never won't take that augment. Like I will take that augment every time. I don't even look at the other options. That one's so fun.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of fun in there, and I think there's room to even make it more fun. But it shows kind of what's fun about TFT and different systems to interact with. So behind the scenes, there's also two things I wanted to cover. First off, behind Alex, this is probably when you're like interviewing and like almost finishing up your interview. Like, walk me through that and like what you're going through at that point.
Yeah, this was me stalking Mort's stream to learn everything I could about TFT behind the scenes, and then interviewing with folks on TFT, and then folks across the company as well. So yeah, I was deep in interviewing and really really excited at the potential to join this team.
Nice. And then the other thing was behind the scenes was Dragonlands was in development. Witty, you were, basically like secondary on that set. So what's going on at this point?
Yeah, so we're in January and we just had started playtesting Dragonlands, and we're simultaneously, I think, playtesting or about to be playtesting the mid set for Gizmos and Gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like getting really early information on Dragonlands, but it's still not like the priority or the focus of the team because 6.5 is the next thing that's coming out. So
Yeah. Now, I don't know if we want to wait to talk about this or talk about it now, but this Dragonlands playtest you're talking about, there were no dragons, right?
Yes, we have Shyvana and Aurelian Soul in the set, but we didn't have the dragon mechanic, and we didn't have the new 5 dragons. We kind of hadn't really
We didn't even have
realized...
Treasure Dragon yet, did we?
We also didn't have Treasure Dragon. We were testing I'll just say a mechanic called Dragon Eggs.
I've talked about it. You can talk about it.
But it's vaguely what Treasure Dragon ended up becoming, but more like eggs interspersed in different shops, and so you're deciding if you want to buy them to get either item components or other like special things throughout the game, which I think we were getting some good learnings from it at the time, but we were like, is this it? Is this need to be something else? But the lack of dragons was standing out much more prominently. Yep. As not feeling like it was a dragon set without more dragons. So.
Yep. All right, moving on to another patch, 12.3, pretty small patch overall here. I think this is one of those things where it's like we're slowing down on live, things are kind of getting where it is. You know how the cycle goes. It takes about 2 months to get everything perfect, and then it's like, sweet, it's in a good spot, time to throw it all and burn it all to the ground. But otherwise in here, nothing too crazy. Socialite was getting buffed, which, question mark. But yeah, so 12.3, nothing going on. All right, 12.4. We hit the mid set for Gizmos and Gadgets. Neon Knights. I always blank on the mid set names. I'm good at the main set names. But Neon Knights came out, and this was, Linda's first set lead. So Linda and Chloe kind of worked on this, as well as a few others. I think the big thing here was the risk about making because we wanted a lot of content. So we made 20 champions? It was a high number for a mid set.
Yeah, it was something over 20, and we decided that the mid-set mechanic was just going to be more augments, and kind of, I don't even remember exactly how many we added or rotated out, but just kind of like lots of volume of content rather than like one specific or a handful of specific new things.
Yeah, because I had to take Kent off live for like a month and a half to make all these augments. And then, they were working on that because it was 20 champions, but most of them were reprints, with the exception of obviously Silco. Silco, that was the other big deal with Silco. So I still can't believe we made Silco happen.
Yeah, that was really fun because that also, just like Dragons, was not in the very first version of 6.5. It was as we had just started building it and thinking about it. The team had all watched Arcane, was really excited by how awesome that show was. Silco was obviously the standout character, and just I want to say it was Andre, the kind of director of TFT League and Wild Rift, but he kind of just said, "Hey, have you guys thought about making Silco and putting him in the game?"
I will never forget that because it was literally the episode 1, 2, 3 premiere. You know how they did the 3 each week? We're sitting there in the premiere. I get a text literally as we're watching halfway through episode 1. Because he's at the premiere, I'm at home on my couch, and I get a text going, "Hey, Silco in TFT, what do you think?" And I was like, "That'd be sick and impossible. There's no way. Let's do it."
And then I want to say you and I had a meeting on like
Yep.
a Monday or a Tuesday, and you were like, "So do you think we could like pull off getting Silco into the game?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so. Like, let's
Yep.
try it."
And then Art took it, and then and it just went from there. That was definitely one of the crazier things we've done, but it helps, when it comes from the top. So, as a commentary to that, Alex, do you find that like it's easier to get things done when it comes from the top?
No, it's horrifying when it comes from the top because it means we have to prioritize. But I will say, adding the player perspective of like not knowing what Silco was going to be or like really excited about the fantasy, like it was so fun to see TFT like have that first like new player experience as a player to be like, oh, I can be Silco in TFT. That's so hype. I was really really excited as a player. That kept me playing the mid set quite a lot longer than I think I would have otherwise.
Yeah, because there were definitely some other things in the mid set that I think didn't quite land as well. I point at the Hex Tech trait as kind of being nonsense. I look at that trait pretty poorly in the past. Debonair, I think, had some promise to it, but didn't quite land it. It also kind of showed I think Debonair, especially Debonair Draven, really showed how much reprints can do harm. Where if you just like you use it too many times, it's like Draven went from this champ everyone kind of nostalgically looked at to get Draven out of here, Cool.
Yeah, another point in the category of the novelty and the freshness of the experience is still a lot of what new sets need to deliver.
Yep. All right, so Neon Knights goes out. I'm sure balance was perfect. Oh wait, look at 12.5 and 12.4B, and turns out this was when we were starting to really get a grasp of like augments plus champions plus traits plus items equals lots of levers. And my God, if anyone can tell you, it's that any one lever being in the wrong spot throws everything off. I still to this day struggle with the people's perception of like, well, if you buff it, it's unplayable or like it's still a lot. And you can see just looking at these notes, there's a lot going on here. Favorite augment I have to see added here. This was one of Kent's high five where you got 5/5 costs.
Yeah.
That augment has not been back in a long time. So
I want it on my set 8 games. I'll take it.
Oh God.
That's why we love Kent. Kent has the craziest augment ideas, and then Mort has to go, no, Kent, and then bop him down to something realistic. It's
well,
great.
but I mean, to be fair, like half the time I'm like, okay, Kent, that's a great idea. Here's how you make it work. The other half, I'm like, Kent, what are you doing? I will still drag Kent through the mud on what was that one called? Rushdown. The gain 100. It was your team gains 100% attack speed for 8 seconds for the first 8 seconds of combat.
Yeah,
I was like, Kent, no, just no. And I remember we play tested it like twice, and any time it was like they win. Like, yeah.
No.
All right. So moving on to 12.6. Things are starting to get in control here. The patches are getting smaller. And this is right about, Alex, when you started in, right?
Yep, it was right around this time. So I was still deep in onboarding, meeting everyone for the first time, and yeah, still kind of learning the ropes. So was kind of just like shocked by how insane the end of a set launch was. And I was like, holy crap, what did I get myself into? These people are nuts. What we're doing is nuts. But it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm going to keep poking you on that because you have this new perspective, right? Like, Woody and I have been on the team since the beginning. I think at this point, we're just numb to the pain. It just, like, it is what it is. Woody, does that sound about right?
Yeah, so more background context, like, this is about the time that we, within a couple of weeks, both made the decision to add the dragons. So we still didn't know, exactly what their abilities were, and kind of the approach, we're definitely adding dragons. I remember we just started with Aushin. We're like, that's the easiest one. We'll use that Aurelian Soul Skin. Let's see if we can come up with a new spell. And as soon as that worked, we're like, cool. Let's make as many of these as we can. Basically.
Yeah. So that's a good talking point because I remember that meeting. Right. We're like like a third of the way through the mid set. And set 7 Dragonlands wasn't really hitting the bar. Right. Like we weren't really getting it. And I remember it was like one of those times where, okay, you, me, and Julie had to go into a room and basically powwow for like, what was it, 4 hours? And just like, okay, what are our options? What can we do that's actually achievable in the time frame? And I get a lot of compliments from like Jeff that like that was how you handle that kind of situation. But it was like we came back with like, here are the 5 things we could do. What should which here's the one we recommend. And I always tell people this is how you should present ideas when you're presenting upwards, right? It's like, we thought through all the different options. Here are the 5 things we looked at that are the best. Here's the one we recommend. Now you guys are in charge. You can make the call if you disagree. And usually that shows that you've covered all your bases and everything. But that's where we're like, look, we can make, what was it, 7 dragons, I think it was?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
7 dragons, but they're going to be a bunch of Gallios and Aurelian Souls and Shyvanas. And are you cool with that? Yep. All right, here we go. So, does that about sound right, Witty?
Yep. Kind of, and we can talk about this more when we get further along, but I was really happy the whole time that we just made the decision to make the dragons, right? And people will talk about like, hey, I wish it was like more variety in the model, or it was more like Silco where they felt even more unique from one another. But at this point we knew that we weren't going to have the time to do that. But the dragon mechanics themselves, we were like, they have to feel really special. They have to feel novel. And so this is maybe the counterbalance of, well, when we do new things, novelty can work out well, but you can have mechanics that just aren't good. And at this point, we were really just kind of making a gut call, and we weren't gonna, there's only so much more play testing that we were gonna have after this point. So
yeah, this was another mechanic. Well, we're out of time. Got to get it out the door and make it the best it can be. So, and then again, just to touch on it one last time. So, Alex, the other thing I wanted to talk about is, so you're starting at Riot at this point, and basically the story I always hear from every Rioter, including myself, is like, the first 3 or 4 months are kind of like, it's fine, it's slow, you're kind of figuring it out. And then you blink, and you're buried in work. So, does that match your experience?
That's so very accurate. So I think even more so for me. So when I joined, I had about a month of overlap with Xavier, who's one of our old producers on the team. But after that, I was on my own. So I was the only product manager across all of gameplay after that first month. So I was very quickly thrown into the fire. So Witty was reaching out to me for stuff. You were reaching out to me. I was like, all right, I'll figure this out as I go. But yeah, it was and I think like long term, it was actually healthier because I just learned a bunch of context and a bunch of things really quickly. But yeah, those first couple months were pretty nutty on my side.
Nice.
Also, it's worth noting that at this point-ish, Set 8 is now in development. So the team that had been working primarily on the mid-set for Set 6 is now working on 8.
That's right. Because Neon Knights is out. We usually go about one more patch, fixing bugs, doing whatever, and then it's like, okay, got to start working on the next set. So that's right. They started working on Monsters Attack.
Yep, we're not playtesting or anything at this point. We're just kind of getting our ideas in place, figuring out what we probably decided on the theme about this time. But still very early planning for mechanics and exactly what we're doing. So
exactly. All right. 12-7. I'm just looking at this patch picture, and all I see is apparently someone, probably me, got the urge to change like 88 augments. So, that's cool. Which kind of makes sense. Like, it's funny too. We've kind of gotten this situation now where if you try to adjust anything in the patch, you end up having to touch everything, and the patch looks ginormous. So now it almost comes in waves where it's like you do the champs and traits one patch, then the augments another patch, then the items another patch, and it's like otherwise they just kind of become these like monsters. But yeah, a lot of changes in here. High 5 became gold. I think that was when it was 4 or 5 costs. 4 score. Yeah, I'm trying to look around. Nothing too crazy here. Sharpshooter. Remember when Sharpshooter was a silver augment?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Patches like this remind me, and you can speak to this more confidently, Mort, but one of the big balance problems with the game is you can get the first pass of balance pretty good, kind of have a lot of things be viable, but then you might not have like power where you like want it to be, right? You can have like, oh, well, this champion's like really strong, but their traits are terrible. So they're balanced, but they, this other champion that's next to them is bad, but it's because the trait is bad. So you can't just buff the trait because the other champion's then going to be overpowered. So you want to make as few changes as possible, but it's you're like, well, I got to make multiple changes just to keep the game sane.
Oh yeah, no, and then you do all that, and then you get yelled at because you're tinkering too much, and it's like, why are you changing all these things and tinkering? It's like, no, but there's a logic train here. Leave me alone. I'm trying. Oh god, the number of times I've had to explain myself is like, why did you change 10 things this patch? And you're like, it's like that meme with the guy pointing at the diagram.
Charlie Day just completely insane, trying to balance the game.
Yes, and I'm already like, I know I'm not supposed to be working over the break, but I'm already like playing Monsters Attack, and I'm doing the same thing, and so, yep. All right, 12.8. So this patch, if you look at this image, I don't know if you guys have this on your screen, but 12.8 is just 6 traits. That's it. So it's a very small patch. So somehow at this point, we seem to have gotten Neon Knights in an okay state. I think from a balance perspective, Neon Knights started to get pretty good at this point, but it was still kind of showing what was missing, right? It was like, again, it's a bunch of reprint champions. People are getting a little tired of it. The highs weren't quite as high as some other sets. So this is where we also learned, like we talked about, changing like Yone and Urgot into Sivir and Draven was like a big downgrade, and so like that was another one of those things that we had to take away from the set here. Alex, go ahead, Woody.
I was just going to say, accepting the reality that because full sets have a lot more development time than mid sets, it's just going to be much harder, if not impossible, to get these really like high quality 4 and 5 costs. It's just like sometimes you get it right. Like I'm very proud of Silco as an example, but if you're rotating 20 champions, you're going to be taking out some fun stuff for some maybe less fun stuff.
Yep. Anything going on behind the scenes, Alex, here in your area?
Too much. I think this is when we started very early conversations, I think around Sohm and like potentially creating like a new dragon with one of our vendors, probably right around this time. So, which is really exciting. Those conversations and timelines take quite a while. So just shining a light on just how long that kind of stuff takes for us and the team.
Yeah, that was a good one for sure, because we knew we could only make the 7 dragons for Dragonlands, but we knew we wanted to make our own. It still drives me nuts to this day that once Sohm was revealed, which we'll talk about later, people are like, oh, is that they just ported that from like Kais's Recall? It's like, no, we made a new dragon. Come on, man.
Yeah, at this point, so we're just doing a little bit of conversations around the mid set for 7. At this point, I think Treasure Dragon was like locked and loaded, basically. We were like, cool, this is good. This is part of the mechanic. Dragons, we were still getting some of the pieces. Like, I think the Jade Dragon was still very different at this point, was the like more assassin-y, like jumping around version rather than the 1-2 smack version. But Aoshin and I think Siphon had been stable for a while. Oh, and we did a little bit more trying to respond to the like reprint learning from 6.5. So I think about this time we changed Talon's spell from being a reprint from set 4 to being that kind of new version. There was probably a couple more of those like, hey, for these higher cost champions especially, let's try to pivot to like, even if it's still 4 cost Talon, have it be 4 cost Talon that does something different rather than the same.
Yep. Cool. All right, moving on. 12.9. Oh, this patch. Okay, so before we talk about this patch, we should talk about the championship. So this is where the Gizmos and Gadgets championship happened. And my memory is going to blank me because, again, time is an illusion. But this was the one where China dominated with the 8 bodyguard at the end. And probably one of the, like, least... Not least exciting, that's not the right word, but just like anticlimactic finals I think we've had to date. Because wasn't it over in like 4 games?
Yeah, it was over super early. Like literally the bodyguard game was the highlight. So I think that tells you a lot about like the excitement of the end of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just such a because he went like 2-1 or like 4-2-1-1 or something like that. It was just something insane. And the 8th place game when he hit the 8 bodyguard, it was like, well, see you at the finish line. Because I think I was casting or I don't know, or I was behind. I don't know. But the point is, 8 bodyguard championship happened, and China won for the. This was the first China win. Now my timelines are messed up. Who won? No, second China in a row. Because it was 5. 5 was the first one with the Italy. And so 6 was China winning again. So, yeah. Cool.
In terms of like kind of behind the scenes dev stuff that's going on, I have to mention this was more impactful for me than it was for you, I think, Mort. But we had moved into a new building on the Riot
Oh
campus.
yeah.
Before Riot was like uh uh some people were working from home, some people were working from the office, but TFT hadn't established like its own area really. We were still kind of in like a kind of just odd spot in the office, and then they're like,
Well, you
cool,
were.
this is going to be the TFT building. Moved into that, and it's like we have a conference room called Silco with a big splat the Silco splash art on the wall. I love there's a room upstairs called Dankest Dungeon, named after one of our arena skins.
Yep. Yep.
But kind of it's all TFT themed, TFT art everywhere. It's very very cool.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say the old spot was like you were sitting near like the CEOs and stuff.
Yeah, we were literally like TFT playtest would happen, and then there was like one desk away, like the CEO and the president, and
Yep.
I
Yep.
would see whoever. It was very very funny.
Alex, you had a desk over in that old area, right?
No, I just worked from home until we went to the new spot, so I was
Okay.
only in T building. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because I had a spot there because we were doing that was pre 131 though, so we hadn't switched to
Yes.
131 yet. So okay. Okay, cool. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, so patch 12.9. So, Alex, I think you've worked with me long enough now to know that sometimes I just come in and go, I want to make the game better, and I don't care what it takes. This was one of those moments. I know players were kind of like, I'm not really super enjoying this. But I went, you know what? Screw it. Let's buff everything. And I don't know if you're looking at this picture, but there are like 42 buffs and one nerf.
Just makes me happy that Morello is one of the nerfs. Like that
Yep.
part just makes me especially
Yep.
happy.
The other thing that's not shown here was the egg. We were talking about what was our like for fun mechanic, and we did the egg because I had the idea of like let's just give everyone a tome of traits randomly, and that'll expand their trait options and change the way the game plays. And then the team had an even better idea, which was to turn that into a teaser for the next set using the Draconic asset because we already had the art asset. And so this was like one of the lowest cost but highest effective patches we've ever had. If I remember correctly, player numbers started going like back up pretty substantially because of this patch and the Dragon Egg. So
Yeah, it was one of the weirdest like player responses of like normally at the end of a set, players kind of drop off and play other games and go to the waiting room for the next set. But yeah, when we dropped the eggs, there was actually an uptick. So like at best, we kind of hope for like holding the pattern, but yeah, the eggs were really really impactful on the player experience, and yeah, definitely something good learning for us for future mid sets and sets as well.
yeah, for me especially, it just highlighted the importance of making as many champions fun and viable and as possible. Something that sometimes we fall into the habit of when we get close to balance in a set, we like, hey, let's nerf these 3 champions. And then the next patch, let's nerf these 4 champions. And instead, what we really need to be doing is going, well, what about the champions like nobody just buys right now? How do we get them to be really exciting? And so I remember this is where we started seeing like time flies really take off. I like doing that just for Robin and stuff like that and trying to make more of these champions just even more exciting. So cool. All right, so then that leads into 12.10 because that was the first time we had also done the for fun patch, a patch before PBE, so people got to enjoy it for 4 weeks, and that was also really successful. Unfortunately, set 7 wouldn't give us the same benefit, but otherwise this was a very small patch because this is when Dragonlands went to PBE. So, Witty,
Yep.
Witty, you were on there. How are you feeling when Dragonlands goes to PBE?
I remember this feeling like a pretty average sort of PBE, at least in terms of like number of bugs we needed to fix was like, fixing a lot of bugs, but was reasonable. And like I don't know, for some reason this was not a very memorable PBE cycle for least me. But
I
It
have
was
some very strong memories, but go for it,
Yeah,
Alex.
I was going to say it was very memorable for me. Not just it was my first PB, but like the sheer response of players trying to get on PBE for set seven was pretty insane. I remember working really closely with a lot of the teams across Riot just to keep the PBE alive for the first couple days because I don't think they were quite experienced or ready for that rush, especially from China. So like it would kind of be the same thing every day. We'd have this huge wave of NA and EU players come on, then it would chill out. We would lower all the restrictions, and then China would wake up and just slam us again at like 7 p.m. So that was a fun 3 day experience of learning and how to grow and allow space for people to log on.
It's always this thing now that we've proven a couple times, right? Is like if you're coming off a good set, Gizmos and Gadgets was a very good, very popular set. The next set is going to be like insanely high at the top, and so you have to like be ready for that. And man, PBE was not built for that level of demand, as we will talk about again in 6 months from this. I guess, okay, the thing that I'm going to remember about this, and we'll talk about it as we launch, is just like, Witty, you mentioned bugs and balance. Oh man, this was a rough patch for me, but we'll talk about it as we go on. So, okay, so 12-11 hits, Dragonlands is out the door. It's a perfectly balanced set. Everything worked out great. Dragons were perfect. Wait, no. But overall, it definitely hit the bar. Like for most of the development, we were worried that it wasn't going to feel dragony enough. We did it, right? Like it felt very dragony. We managed to get that there. I think a lot of people had fun with Nomsy, especially. I think Nomsy was a big standout from this set as far as just like character and fun. Some interesting traits in there. Others, I think we'll look back on and like, Witty, I'm going to pick on you a little bit, but like Whispers, I think we look back at Whispers and we're like, well, it existed,
Yep. Nothing too special.
Yeah. Any other major takeaways from launch?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember at this, I mean, just background development, we're kind of already working on 7.5. We're grasping with we have a Riot does a week off a summer break, and so that's like happening like a week or two from now. So we're like, oh, how do we balance that and get what we need to get done for the mid set? So
yeah. The other thing going on behind the scenes, kind of at the like BU lead level, which for terminology, that's our business unit lead, because TFT is now its own game, so it has its own leadership core. I was going to those meetings. We're starting to plan for like the 2-3 years out. So we're starting to plan. Now, obviously, I can't talk about what those plans are, but like for the first time, and I think in a long time in TFT's history, we're like, what are we looking at like in 2023, 2024? What do we need to do to get there? And we're starting to get some long-term vision stuff behind the scenes, which is really cool as to see, especially more of the Riot really higher up people start to really invest in TFT, which felt pretty damn good. So
one other thing that happened, I'm gonna get the timeline's not perfect here, but we had a pretty big influx of new hires and especially new designers, because we had been trying to hire for a while, and we had a few of those hires that landed. The kind of Legends of Runeterra like developers moving around, we got a decent number of people coming over, so they're starting to join the team. We had a summer intern that joined. So I just memorable development moments. I remember for the first time like teaching a class on how to like make champions and traits, because there was enough people to do that as like a class setting, which was very that's something I've never done in my career.
So I like
far.
that you bring this up, because I'm gonna rant a little bit, and Alex can back me up on this. But it was definitely one of those moments where it feels like nothing you do is good enough. Because obviously for like 2.5 years, Witty, you especially can attest to, it was, we need more people. We need more people. Like, we definitely need more people. And so it was like, bam, we got it. We got this huge influx of people. And it was like, well, now we have to ramp them up, and ramping them up is going to be hard. It's like, yeah, we know, but what do you want? It was like pulling out hairs, like, ah. But like you said, it obviously was a pain point, right? Because you have a bunch of people that like didn't magically make everything better overnight. But it's like we're finally starting to see a lot of those newer people that have joined the team now really ramp up. Some of them are already contributing really heavily now, a few months later. So, but it was
For
a price.
the
Oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I remember this point in particular because when I joined, we sometimes struggled to get enough people in for a playtest, and then
Yep.
all of a sudden we had like 3 playtests going every morning, and that was just like, oh wow, there's so many people here. All of a sudden, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Get them ready.
Man, the playtest docs went from like, okay, I can read these in 10 minutes to 24 people's detailed feedback was like, this is a marathon. I felt like I lost a lot of lunches reading through those docs and trying to get everything out of it. And there's still room to improve on how we do that. But yeah, a lot of people. So, but again, all of this is just pointing to TFT growing, yo. So,
Yep. Yep.
cool. All right. So, moving on, Dragonlands is launched. We're now in 12.12, and I'm looking at this patch picture, and it is big. There are a lot of changes. And so, I'm just going to call it out now, and it'll basically be like this patch and the next two. But I think we micro-patched, the number that kept getting spewed out was like 11 times in 4 weeks or something. I forget the exact number, but I had to listen to that stupid number in like 10 presentations. Does that sound about right, Alex?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think Mort and I just slowly melted in every meeting that it was brought up.
Yeah.
And we're just malding. But yeah, it was definitely. I mean, to the point of like that, the impact of us throwing those dragons in really late in
Yeah.
development was like we didn't have time to play test them and get a feel for them. And then when we were focused on how those feel, there was things like Nami poking up that we weren't looking at, or like all these other fun little things that
Yep.
we just didn't see. So definitely felt that impact pretty quick.
Yeah, and it's funny because we say the time, but time isn't even all of it, right? Like there's only so much playtest bandwidth to go around. Witty, I know sometimes we used to do those jam days. I don't think we even did a jam day for Dragonlands.
And if we did, it was like not at the right time.
Yep.
But yeah, I can't even remember doing it. So we knew what we needed to do, but yeah, we were kind of chasing our own tail in
Yep.
terms of, do we spend more time, fixing bugs or polishing this spell or swapping this out or just playing the thing to learn
Yeah.
from it. So
All of this is a lot of words to say that we know the balance of Dragonlands sucked. I'm just going to put it in player terms for a second. Like, the Dragon of Balance Lands at launch was not good, and we were reflecting on that pretty hard. And I got to say, as the person who cares way too much, I was taking it really hard. But, I think our new game director said it best. He's like, yeah, the balance was bad, but I don't look at it as like the two people failed. I looked at it as the two people doing this Herculean task did the best they could. But that doesn't really help with player sentiment, and so I had some rough days in this time for sure. So
I say you also were the one that raised the most flags about it. Like you were very clear of like dragons are going to be very hard to balance. Like you were raising that flag from pretty much day one
I
about
mean,
those.
it's always hard, right? Because I have this lesson. Witty's heard me give this speech once before, but it's very easy to look at someone pitching a new feature and go, here are all the ways it won't work. Because new features inherently like are likely to fail, right? So that's just betting on the obvious outcome that it's going to fail. But I was trying to be very like, look, logically, here are the things that are going to be challenging. Here are the interactions we may not be seeing. And so at least called the shot, but God, it still hurt. It still hurt, man. So yeah, I mean, I guess to sum it all up, like players, if you're having a rough time, trust us. It's hurting us too, and we just want to do better for you too. So all right, well, let's move on from that topic.
we're also just more background on,
Oh, yeah.
on development. We're now playtesting the mid set for 7 and set 8.
Yep.
So we're full swing in development of both of those. The mid set we pretty much like called our shots and went for them for the most part. We pretty early figured out we just wanted to expand the treasure dragon with order and chaos treasure dragon.
Yep. Yep.
So we got that into playtesting. We were like, hey, here's the number of unit swaps we're gonna do. Really, the only we started playtesting and then did like 4 more swaps, which were all reprints, but low cost reprints,
Yep.
which I think went pretty well, right? So you got like, Wukong and Jax we added later on. And one of the last things we added was Zippy was not in the original development plan.
Yep.
So
Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, playtest wise, we're doing the morning evening thing where it was mornings are the mid set, evenings are the new set, and so yeah, a lot of time then taken to those as well because you're doing that, the feedback, read the feedback. It's about an hour and a half each playtest, so a lot of time in there. 12-13 balance is finally starting to stabilize a little, but only a little. We're dealing with some big stuff here, like the blue buff, blue battery situation. We had to rework Asol. He was a pain to get right. I think it took us way too long to get Asol right. Assassins. That's the other thing, man. Every meta where assassins are dominant is like chalk in my ears, man. That's a saying, right? Chalk in my... So, but yeah, Nami, Lilia, all that fun stuff. So, yeah. All right, 12-14, moving on. Another big patch. A lot of augment adjustments, a lot of crown adjustments. Cruel Pact got reworked. This got Cruel Pact into a decent spot. Oh, okay, I see one on here. So, Alex, I want you to tell the story on your side first, and then I'll tell my side. It says attack damage rebalance.
Yeah. So I often get these pings from Mort, and it normally just starts with, "So I have an idea, dot, dot, dot." And then he types out his plan. And this was one of them. Mort wanted to pretty much redesign the entire way that one of our systems operated. And I was at first like, absolutely not, more like, we don't have time for this, we have so much other stuff to do. And then, as we often do, we just talked through it. He got me on the right side of it, talked how it could happen, ensured that we could play test it enough to make sure that it was good to go, and that there wouldn't be like a huge player impact, which I think was my worry. So viewing it from the player POV, it's like we've already had a pretty rough balance spot for the past like month-ish of the set. Like if we throw something like a giant wrench on top of that, like, holy shit, how is that going to land with players? But Mort assured me is like they probably won't even know that it happened. But yeah, that's just kind of how Mort and I operate. He'll just like throw ideas out there to me, and then we chat through them and eventually make them work and get them into the game.
Yeah, I in my reviews, I remember Andre phrased it as Mort has a bias to action, and I think that couldn't be, that's definitely true. Sometimes I kind of detest not just Riot. This isn't a Riot problem. This is like a game development problem. Maybe it's even a tech. You were at Facebook. Was this a problem at Facebook also? But
no, I would say the opposite. I would say people threw in stuff without telling anyone, and then it was just a surprise when we all saw it on the site. Yeah, good times.
Okay. So yeah, but anyway, at least at Riot, there's this thing where it's like, we want to do a thing. Well, here's all the reasons you can't, and here's all the reasons it'll take a year, and we're not going to do it. And I'm like, I don't want to deal with that. So oftentimes, if there's a change that I can make the game better by myself, I'll just do it by myself. And so that was the attack damage. And like, to give you an idea, like, I think if we're always trying to make the game better, we're always thinking through stuff like this, especially for core systems that have been there since day one. For example, I think this is the first time the two of you will be hearing about this, and it's not a serious one, so it's not a big deal, but like, I've begun questioning the 80% HP scaler. Is that the reason why supers are so dominant right now? It's like, is that the right number? Are we in the right spot? But like, we have to be questioning these realities if we're always going to get the game better. And this was one where it's like, because we were coming off assassin metas, where it was, I remember specifically, it was like the assassins in particular, with the way they multiplicatively scaled with AD. It was 1-star assassins were absolute trash. 2-star assassins were kind of balanced. And 3-star assassins were ridiculously overpowered and would like one-shot all your carries. And it was like, well, yeah, because 1.8 times everything is incredibly hard to balance. And so, now I will say, long-term, this actually led to a really good thing that I don't think a lot of people even realize is true in Monsters Attack, is we now have a very clear spell framework on every champion in the set right now. I was pointing this out to Lobby too, that like every 1 cost, their spell scaling is now 50%, 50%, 50%. At 3 costs, it's base 50%, 75%. And like, this helped us get to that point because we knew the AD scaling was 50%. So we could use that as a basis to make all the spells scale and aim for a target. And so this did lead to some really long-term improvements for the game, I think. TLDR, Mort was right.
This felt good.
So despite all these rough times, because that's the other thing too, whenever I'm doing bad, I get motivated to do good. So cool. All right, 12-15, small patch. we're getting ready for mid-set launch. Witty, you were a big part of the mid-set, right? So like you're working on like Dark Flight and any other big things from the mid-set here?
Let's see. Yeah, we're finalizing. Just thinking through the things that landed last, but Zippy, Lagoon, we're still getting a lot of the.
Oh,
At this
yeah.
point, we know what we're going with, but there's a lot of work to do in terms of like the UI of the experience,
Yep.
and it was like pretty bug prone, so we had to fix a lot of that stuff. Dark Flight. All I remember a lot with Dark Flight is talking with you and Kent a lot on like this is really risky. This might not be balanceable. Let's decide whether or not we're going to go with this
Yep.
or not, because we knew that just anything that interacts with items in our game is going to
Yep.
have like fundamental balance risk. There's just less levers, and we knew that this was a tricky one. So we're just
I-
being honest with ourselves around
Yeah.
like, do we want to do this or do we want to do something more boring?
I remember we stack ranked the risks, and it was Zerat was number 1, Aura items were 2, Zephyr was 3, and I think there was one more. I can't like Redemption or something. And we had it backwards, right? It was like ZZ or the Aura item Zeke's ended up being the really oppressive one. Zerat was like strong, but not insanely strong. So yeah,
I think this was around the time ish more when I can't remember if you pinged me or I pinged you, and I was like, "So what do you think about changing dragon costs for the mid set and making them cheaper?"
yeah, no, that was yeah.
Probably
We
right around
were.
here.
I remember I came very, very early in the mid set. I was like, rule number 1 is we're making it so you can play more than one dragons. I was real clear about that one. The cost one, you and I went back and forth because I think we both wanted it, but it was the pro con of the change cost, right? Because anytime you make a
Yeah,
big change like that, change aversion is real. And so I think we ended up risking it. And I think it was the right call. Now, that being said, I don't think it moved the needle that much either way. Like, it definitely was better, but dragons were already kind of where they were, and this wasn't going to like cure dragons, you know. So, but yeah,
agreed.
you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, we went back and forth quite a bit. I mean, we even talked about what if we just made them 3, 4, 5 costs for a second. That was a conversation. Yeah, that,
Oh,
that conversation we
right.
had more was we went back and forth on that for like a week and a half on what to do about the cost. Yeah, and to your point, like I think it moved the needle a little, but like dragons are dragons at the end of the day. There's only so much you can do because you want to keep that cool dragon power fantasy and all that. So
Yeah, the thing we didn't talk about that maybe we should have was the traits, the +3 traits. I think that was the thing that actually was doing the most harm to it as a mechanical system. And I don't think we gave it enough questions just because it was like baked into so much of our UI and so much of our rules that changing it probably wouldn't have been something we could have realistically done in the time frame. But mechanically, that's the thing I look back on and I'm like, God, that limited comp flexibility so much.
Yeah, I remember not talking about that for the mid set, but talking about that before we shipped
Yeah.
7,
Yeah.
because that was my biggest concern. Is like, oh, we're gonna like have to. I remember I actually had a longer conversation with Kent about like how he was thinking about balancing traits if with plus
Mm-hmm.
3 to a trait, and I was like, oh, I understand we probably can get this balanced, but the balanced version I was very nervous was like not gonna be very fun, or at
Yep.
least not gonna be very flexible.
Yep.
So. Yeah,
Which was
maybe you
true.
should have revisited that for the mid set.
Yep. Cool. All right. 12-16, another patch. This is, again, really big patch here. We're seeing nerfs to Siphon, Shioyu, and Tasia. I think at this point, I've started calling Siphon Ragnaros because of Froden's meme. You know, so it is what it is. And then 12-17. All right. So now we're launching the Dragonlands mid set, which is called Uncharted Realms. Let's see. Some big things in here were the Astral rework, which I think took Astral from like this kind of really frustrating F tier trait to a slightly toxic D tier trait. So like, woohoo! Definitely reassured the bill though that no drip, because like we basically reprinted Yordle, right? That's basically what Astral was, and it was fine. Dark Flight, as you said, Witty. I mean, you made Dark Flight. What are your reflections on Dark Flight?
Yeah, it played out about the way I expected it to, which was pretty quickly players were like, we've solved it. This is exactly how you play around it. Then occasionally people would do other things and it would still be like reasonable. I think this ended up being more fun for like kind of our average ELO gold players who were less like punished for doing wackier things like duplicating their Zephyrs or making we had just launched Protector's Vow, and so people were like, "Oh, I can duplicate Protect." I remember we in development we even had a playtest where we're like, "Wow, like Darkflight is so broken. Look at this like Protector's Vow Darkflight comp," and then like a week later we're like, "Oh no, Protector's Vow is just like wildly overpowered."
broken. Yeah.
Turns out if you duplicate the best item in the game
7 times, yeah,
it's really strong.
Whee!
So yeah.
Darkflight also was probably one of the tougher traits with interactions with augments. Double Trouble Darkflight did some really gross things, I think, which is a shame because like Double Trouble is such a fun augment in theory, but yeah, when a trait just says it's fine to play 2 Rels and 2 Aphelioses and who cares, and that got real gross. So Dragon was now, there were a lot more dragons. Again, I think we improved Dragon, but here's a question for both of you. Was making Dragon a vertical trait a mistake?
I was never, I remember I talked to you about this, where I was never really happy with the way we like balanced Dragon 5. And I was like, well, we kind of can't make Dragon 5 like the best thing, right? We're like, we want you to stop at 4 so you still have some comp building variety. But my, the smooth brain is like, but the 5 is the thing that's exciting, right? It's got a bunch of them, hit my high cost thing, and so for that not to be like really powerful, and then we still then added Dragon 6 a patch or 2 later, and that was really high roll, really powerful, but kind of like trying to balance the realities of here's the thing I want to chase, but if we make that the actual strong thing, then your comp building variety goes way down. So.
Alex, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it was a mistake because I think there was such a wide swath of players that wanted that fantasy of like full dragon. I think the tricky side of the other was like there was a very clear optimization path, and I think the competitive scene really found that quickly of like you just throw in the 2 frontline dragons, throw in whatever backline dragons you hit, and you're pretty much going to get a top 4, which I think is kind of a bummer when you want to try other comps that you just you can't play the TFT that we're really feeling with set 8 of like playing really flexibly because you feel like, oh, there's this clear path in front of me that's so much better. So I think from that side it's a little bit of a bummer, but man, that like dragon fantasy is still so exciting for players to hit.
Yeah, again, this is where that +3 trait, I think, does a lot of harm, right? Because, like, Swain, I think, was the biggest example of this. You literally could not play Swain without Darkflight. Like, he was just a dead unit without Darkflight, which meant he was also dead in Dragon, which meant, like, what you could actually play in Dragon was pretty limited. And so getting them to work in both was something I don't think we ever quite landed on. But I agree that the fantasy was required. If we didn't have it, players would have begged for it, so... Agreed.
With just the number of dragons we added, right? Our thought process was more like, well, we're going from 7 to, I want to say, did we do 11 or 12? And like saying you have these 12 units and you can never play 2 of them together in a comp, we're like, oh, that's just going to make comp building even worse than 7.0. So,
yep. Cool. Okay, so behind the scenes now, so this is shipped. So now we're starting to move people over to future sets. I'll just leave it at that for now, future sets. But the other thing is Monsters Attack isn't in like the best shape either at this point. Alex, do you recall exactly where we are with Monsters Attack at this point?
Yeah, so I think right before the mid-set or right around this time is when we do something called Player Labs, where we bring in players both here and in China to test out a new set and kind of get early thoughts on it. And from our side, we were still trying to figure out what the mechanic was going to be. At this point, we were still on the path of a really tough to beat PvE experience where, you hit that big crab god and you might die, or you have like a pretty high chance of dying every time you fight it. But it's sort of like a continued battle of a health bar that you continually break down, and eventually you get that big pinata. And there was a lot of strong opinions in both directions for that mechanic, and for better or worse, we were kind of using that player lab as like the final decision of whether we were going to go with that path or try something different.
Yeah, so 2 things to touch on, or I guess 3 things actually. The first is that, yeah, we had those invasions that were kind of harder PvE fights. They also had boss items that were unique items tied to the specific boss. I remember, for example, one was like Urgot's Claw, which every time you cast your spell would make those tidal waves. and that did some pretty wonky things. So a bunch of new items to balance was also pretty insane. At this point, we didn't even have hero augments yet, if I recall correctly, because, we're working on invasions. And so what this means is, just like you just heard with Dragonlands, this is another example where, like, we're 3 months out, we still don't have the mechanic finalized. So,
Yeah,
looking
hero
so
augments wasn't even a twinkle in your eye, and all I was thinking about was, holy cow, if we're going to do invasions, we're going to have so much art cost.
Yep.
Not only go into the invasion itself, but also, like you mentioned, those item icons. All of that stuff has to be created, and we have a pretty limited, like, quote unquote budget of like things that we can do, like, personnel wise. So yeah, I was a little bit stressed at this point for a decision to get made.
Yeah. So like you said, though, we had the player lab, we made the call, and I don't even remember how hero augments came exactly. I don't want to, but the point is, at some point we said we need to make hero augments, and then we had to make 118 of them. So we went, and that's where Connor really stepped up. J-Bach, Kent helped a bit. It was actually one of the really good onboarding things. We're talking about onboarding. We had a bunch of people that were working on future sets come back and make a few hero augments, and that gave them some block builder practice, right, Witty?
Yeah, we had a lot of people end up kind of contributing to set 8 in different ways, but it was good. It was a lot of like, hey, here's newer people that can kind of take on these bite-sized projects of, this slice of hero augments, or maybe like polishing this like champion that they maybe didn't work on the set from the beginning, but kind of get to do the final parts. So from a development standpoint, we have a lot of people working on 8, and then a few people, including myself, kind of starting to do planning for future sets. So I was starting to do some set 9 stuff at this point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So 12-18 shipped a patch. Turns out we have to buff and nerf a bunch of champions because, as always, we got to change some stuff. Lucky Gloves was a new augment that also needed some love. Another Kent special. I was proud of Kent for this one because he made an augment that required a whole separate table. He's learned my lessons. Make all the tables. Now, granted, every time we ship a new set, we now have to make the Lucky Gloves table, and that's always a pain in the butt. But, it's good stuff. So, again, more development. Hero augments are happening. Things are moving. 12-19. Go ahead.
One thing we didn't talk about for 8 is we actually had threats at a pretty, I'd call it, stable but nervous state. So we have threats in the game. They're exactly what they ended up shipping as, which is, they're just more powerful champions, but that don't have a trait. And we just kept having these playtests where we were like, well, sometimes this is fun. It's adding some flexibility, but some people are experiencing it and they're like, I, don't know when I'm supposed to play them. Should I play multiple? So threats are just kind of, they're I don't know. We're nervous, is what I would say.
So threats went through an interesting cycle, because this is one where I have to give credit to the team, to Linda and her team, because even I was like, the most fun part of building a comp is the trait web, and you want to make 8 champions that don't have a trait web. This seems quite bad. Like, first instinct is like, this looks bad. For a while, they had a mechanic that was called like the assist armory, where it was basically like at stage, I think it was 3-1 and 4-1, you would get basically essentially a tome of traits that would basically go, hey, here's some emblems. And the idea was, it was like you would use those emblems to put them on likely a threat, maybe not, and they'd be joining your team. So if I'm Anima Squad, I get an Anima Squad emblem, put it on Cho'Gath, now we've got help. Great. That ended up being really weird and really complicated. But to your point, threats never quite went away. They also, at one point, they had red borders, which made them feel a lot more important than they were. They felt like this whole incredibly special mechanic, when actually they're just supposed to be champions that you think about in a slightly different way. I think that was actually the biggest thing that did good to the mechanic, was just getting rid of those red borders. But yeah, it's so
fun.
What's that?
The red borders were just so fun. Like, so what Mort's talking about is the shop card itself was just like this really like eerie red at the bottom, and like it was impossible not to click that unit. Like, you had to buy the red shop card. It was so fun.
Yep. But throughout it all, like, we were talking about invasions and hero, but like threats just kind of stuck around and ended up sticking around and actually have done a lot of good things for the set. Though The one thing we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but like threats being a viable vertical right now without any augments is a bit of a question mark. But we can talk about that later. So cool. 1219 is happening. This is where everything's getting developed. Like I said, we're doing the holy crap. We got to get monsters attack out the door. Yeah, I think this is. Was this right around? No, I think we got one more patch to go. So okay, 1220. Some more augment adjustments. Getting ready for championship. Trying to make sure the balance is as good as it can be. Because at this point, we're also dealing with a lot of augment diff. This is things like Beast Den just being wildly OP. Think Fast 2-1 with Astral was basically an instant win, stuff like that. So again, a lot of augments. Siphon back on the nerf list. Ragnaros doing his things. Yeah, and so I think this is right around the point too where we had to move Kent off of live. Does that sound about right, or am I a little ahead of myself?
Nope, it was right around here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So moving Kent off live kind of put us in a precarious situation again, where live is a little struggling, but doing its thing. Witty, you're at this point you're in Future Land. We'll just call it Future Land.
Oh yeah.
And what I will say is, because obviously we can't spoil anything, but Witty's crushing it in Future Land, and Alex is going to tell you the same thing. What Witty has set up for in Future Land, everyone's actually like, wait, this just sounds great. Everything sounds great. And for the first time, we're actually like, wait, this is just all great. Does that sound about right, Alex?
Yeah, I think most of Woody and I's one-on-ones was like, I think things are going too well, question mark. Like, surely something should be going wrong. But yeah, Woody's, as always, is just killing it over in Future Land.
Now, to be fair, we did get our curveballs. So
True.
But it's not the set, right? Like, I feels like the set in Future Land, and no, that's not the theme. I'm just vaguely alluding to things because I can't spoil anything. There's no hints here. I'm not hinting anything. That'd be weird anyway to do a futuristic set right after this. Anyway. So yeah, cool. Things are going well.
It's at this point I'm like working on all this future stuff, and I've always felt this a little bit when I'm like, wow, I'm really not focused on the live state of the game. Although I had one of my most memorable TFT experiences ever, kind of random little development story, where a couple of the new members to the team, Alex and Julian, set up a little team event where we did a 1v1 TFT match, which was, we had on the Riot campus, there's kind of this PC cafe, and so we had 4 computers on one side, 4 computers on the other side, and had one person playing all 4 of the computers. It is incredibly chaotic, super difficult, but really was kind of a fun little experience. So that was my like highlight of 7.5, was having a game where I went 8th, 7th, 6th, and first place with a 6-dragon board. So
doesn't that mean you lose?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay. Because I was about to say, isn't it like total placements? Like, you'd better lose that.
Oh yeah, I'd already lost, but we were like, maybe this one board could get a first, and so.
Amazing. Cool. All right. 1221. 1221 was a fairly small patch because we were getting ready for the championship. So it seems like as good a time as any to talk about the championship. What I will say is the championship seemed pretty good, pretty solid. I mean, again, for what Dragonlands was, I think it was as good as it could be. So we had some entertaining games. China dominated again, first and second. I also have to give props to like the entire esports team because the on-site presentation was really good. I think their choice of casters from various regions, how we had like Bebe join, as well as we had someone from each region, was really good. So I don't know. I enjoyed the broadcast. I thought that was a step up from previous. So
this was the most.
Oh, go ahead, Lee.
As someone who engages more casually with our esports scene, I really liked. I mean, the stories and the like how the games played out were also really dramatic, and that helps a lot. But production value and everything, this felt like a really awesome evolution of our esports scene.
Yeah, I agree. Just seeing the stage, and it was similar to Witty. I was so deep in 8 that I was so far removed from live that like this was my sort of dive back, and I was like, oh, the meta's in a pretty fun spot right now. Like that's great for how worried we were about everything at the start of the mid set. So I thought the championship was really fun.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's always like the meta was good for what I don't know. See, this is where like I get poisoned by all the stuff I read. I'm like, all I can see is the bad. Like, it wasn't perfect, but it was good. It was really good. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. Anyway, okay, so 1222. We did it again. We did the buff everything patch. I went through and buffed everything. But this was also, I think, frankly, this just goes to show. Oh, so we should talk about this part, actually. The bad timing of the championship and PBE really threw a curveball here that we knew was coming, but it was too late to change. Alex, can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is the Thanksgiving
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we pretty much had two options for our PBE cycle. This time was either we lengthen it to 3 weeks or we shorten it and make more at work over Thanksgiving. So the way the PBE cycle works is on that first week, as everyone's probably pretty familiar, we can make daily changes and you'll feel them the next day, and we adapt pretty quickly. But if we had done that on this PBE cycle, we would have only had 2 days to make those daily changes. Then we would have hit Thanksgiving. And then we have something called localization lock, which means we can't make any text-related changes. So we would have been so constrained to the changes we could have made before PBE. So I chatted with Mort and I was like, do we want to lengthen this PBE cycle and kind of see how it goes as an experiment? I mean, from my side, I would love to hear your thoughts more, but like I think it was actually pretty healthy for TFT to have that little bit of extra week in a sense, in terms of like how we were able to ship the set itself. But yeah, it was definitely a back and forth between Mort and I to figure out like what the heck we wanted to do.
Yeah. The other trade-off that we had to make there, though, was that the championship happened after PBE. So a lot of people were already in Monsters Attack. The show match was like, here's this thing you've already been playing for 3 days. So I think that kind of hurt it as well. But I know we're trying really hard to make sure that never happens again. I bring that up also because it hit the For Fun patch. The For Fun patch couldn't be 4 weeks like it was in the previous set. It had only 2 weeks. And so even though this patch ended up being pretty good, it's like, I'm already playing Monsters Attack for a lot of our engaged players, so it didn't really hit the same bar. To your point about the longer PBE, I think it's trade-offs, right? And it's like, I think from a balance perspective, it was obviously great, right? Like we had more time to fix things, and the game still has a lot of bugs right now, so like imagine if we'd been a week down, it would have been even worse. But I do agree it also kind of killed the hype a little, and like this is one of those things that like in a perfect world, right, and infinite time, resources, and perfection, we would launch without a PBE, right, without any bugs and a good balance. And it's like, if we could find a way to do that, that'd be great. And I think, like, obviously as someone who worked on Odyssey, the one mode we shipped without a PBE, it was like incredibly hype, but man, were the trade-offs painful. And the engineers right now, if they're listening to this, are like, never again, I'll kill you. So yeah, it's trade-offs. But again, I think the bigger harm too was just like, the world's happening after, so I think that was pretty painful. So
agreed. And I think it was actually the 7.5 minutes that we could track him chatting about something more. And I was like, what if we did PBE for 2 weeks and then took it away for 2 weeks and then shipped the set? And I remember you just responded, and then gave me a response. We ended up both agreeing that's a terrible idea. But yeah, we're always trying to think of like ways that we can kind of keep that hype with the PB. That's so important for us shipping the set.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of other games do this, right? They do like the closed alpha and then they turn it all off and then they make a bunch of changes and then they launch. So like there still might be something to that. I feel like our engineering team might murder us, but cool.
So rough for a strategy game. Wanting it to be, launch day, people can like really get behind trying to solve the meta, or who can climb fastest. BB really is like the antithesis of that in a lot of ways, but it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at other strategy games for this, right? Like I always felt like Hearthstone, they didn't have PBEs, but also they ran into some meta, so like you can see the trade-offs pretty clearly in other products out there as well. So all right, so then that leads us to our final patch of the year, 1223 and 1223B, where we launched Monsters Attack. So it's out the door. Players are playing it now. Actually, before we talk about that, let's talk about one other thing, which was the Summit. The Summit happened. I think that was a pretty fun tournament. Alex, you got to go and be a part of that as well. But overall, it seems like it kind of captured something that we always knew was there, but a lot of players just haven't got to experience it. But this goes all the way back to set 1 and pre-launch days at the Riot office, where anytime someone would play TFT, someone else would walk up behind them and start like shot calling them and telling them what to do and backseating them, and then 3 people would do it, then 4 people, and the next thing you'd know, you'd have a group of 10 behind a computer. And like we've always known that was fun, but you know, COVID kind of made that impossible. So seeing that again after so long felt so good to just like, they couldn't even see it on the camera, but just off screen there would always be like, there's Solus playing with 4 people behind him, or Spicy Appy's on stream with being backseated by, you know, Gangly and Boys and like 2 other people. And it's like, it felt like a part of TFT that we've always known is there, but we really need to highlight in the future.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the summit was just a huge success all around. And I think the one thing that really stuck with me was just how welcoming and warm the TFT community is. Like once you get offline, you get off of competitive TFT and you remember how many people just deeply love this game and are so grateful for, you know, the stuff we put out, and then getting to see like, you know, all these streamers and, you know, just talk about TFT and like what they're excited about and how the new set's landing and what's good and what's the dark tech. Like it was just really, really fun. So, and getting to meet all the fans was really cool. So I'm hoping that we have more of these in the future.
Yeah, I barely got to do the like fan summit part. I was there for the signing or whatever in the Hyperroll game, but it seemed like some of our team members actually got to see the fan summit as well, and it seemed like that was a really big success also. So cool. But yeah, so Monsters Attack out the door. Generally so far seems pretty good. I mean, I think a lot of the engaged players are enjoying the flexibility. I think the people who don't like reroll obviously are not a big fan of supers, mascots. You know, we could talk about the balance for days. I've got my pages of notes. You've all got your pages of notes. We're all diamond right now, so we've all been playing at least a little bit. Witty, any thoughts here now that you've been playing? Because you played a bunch of games.
Yeah, it's been a fun launch, I think. Again, the balance seems to be, you know, there's like things you can point at, but there's enough different things you can point at, and the meta has shifted enough times that I from that perspective, I think it's been a pretty healthy launch. And yeah, I've played let me look at my tracker here, 110 games at this point, so I'm pretty deep into the set.
I saw like Froden, for example, won a game with Sona carry. So it's like when we talk about meta shifting, there are still things being discovered, and I know it's painful, especially for NA players, but it's actually kind of nice that we can't touch the game for 3 weeks, just because we haven't had one of these like let a new set just sit for a while and see how it goes. You know, that being said, there's obviously things that are needing a fix, but there's other things that's like, well, wait, try to discover something new. And yeah, seeing some of that undiscovered tech happen has been pretty fun so far. See, like I said, seeing Froden win with a Sona comp that's not even on meta sheets is like, yeah, feels good. So, Alex, any Monsters Attack thoughts?
No, I think it's been like a really healthy spot so far. And to your point, like I've really enjoyed. I mentioned it really before, like really quickly before the call, but just seeing the meta develop of like, oh, I'm seeing a ton of duelists today or yesterday, and like all of a sudden, all these like 8 duelist comps, or like the brawlers really coming through lately to counter the supers comp. So yeah, it's been a cool experience to kind of see that flexibility come through in the set again. It's been fun. And I think the other call that I want to say before we get too deep into set 8 was like, I think one of the big things that we really worked on as a team was like trying our best to micropatch less, and just wanted to give a huge shout out to like the live team and everyone else. We only had like 5 micropatches for all of 7.5, which is pretty crazy for how worried we were balance wise. So just want to give a huge shout out to the team of you know, we are always trying to improve, and just want to give a shout out to those folks.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize this, but every time we want to do a micro patch, it's like the engineers and QAs go through hell. It's really hard on them, and so the fact that they're willing to do that is a big deal, and so we appreciate that a lot. Cool. Yeah, Monsters. Oh, yeah, it was Asa. You mentioned Duelist. Asa was mentioning me saying I'm a big fan of Locket Duelist Believer. So yeah, seeing some of that and seeing Locket be an item someone desires was like, what? So that's good. Cool. So now we're all on break and we're all getting ready for 2023. I don't know about you two, but part of me is like, wow, we just did all that, and now you're looking ahead and you're like, and now we have all that to do. So there's a bit of like we're not up to the top of the mountain yet, if there ever is a top of the mountain, but man, there's some cool stuff coming, huh?
Oh yeah, I'm excited for all I mean, as the person who's been very much in future
Futureland.
It's exciting, although it's also, speaking from overall development perspective, then the trade-off is, wow, I'm looking at 8 and thinking of all the things that I think are going well or not as well in the set. I'm like, well, now I want to, integrate those learnings and steer that into future plans, because that's the risk of being too far ahead, is that you start to lose touch with your live game and don't integrate learnings into new content you're making. So,
yeah. Alex, any other 2023 looking? I mean, obviously, it's your first year, so like looking back on your first year, how you feeling about your crazy life-changing decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point of TFT warping time, like I feel like I've been on the team for for like 10 years already. It is insane how like when I think of a set, I think, oh, that's a year, and it's like, oh, it's only live for 4 months. And then like thinking ahead to 2023 and like how far ahead we're thinking now is pretty crazy. I think one of the big perks of all those new hires that we had, we're able to kind of restructure our team a bit and think even further and further out. So yeah, my head is definitely pulled in a lot of different ways of like Mortal ping me about live and I have to dive into that stuff, and then Witty's talking to me about future set stuff, and I'm like, all right, let's switch hats.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot of really really exciting stuff for players to look forward to next year.
The context swapping is really hard sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little exhausting. But, I mean, it's fun because it's just TFT all the time. But,
right.
Yeah, it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I have to acknowledge this, but why time warps is because I have so many birthdays, and so it's just like so many years go by. There, I acknowledge the meme. Now leave me alone.
Feeding the people.
I know it. True. Cool. All right, so that is 2022 in a nutshell. Some good, some bad, a lot of work. I think we're all tired, but at least we got break. Any closing thoughts to wrap us out? Witty, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think I've said a version of this in any public-facing TFT video I've been in, but TFT has just been this bizarre, incredible journey. I am truly in shock that I'm still working on this game and this team, and that the game has become what it is. I mean,
Dead game.
we were very confident and excited for the game when we originally built it, and all the way back in set 1. We did have all these plans and desires for this to be something that was around for years and decades. And there were some people who were like, oh yeah, that'll happen. I think there were a lot of people who were like, this is a novel, like, it is going to be gone within a year. So I'm happy that we maintained the confidence, kind of put in the work, and seeing all that pay off is just incredible. So
nice. Alex, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, similar. I think sometimes I just like look over to people, especially when I was first getting started, and I was like, how is TFT as successful as it is? Like, it is insane, like how everything was just held together at some points by like gum and paper clips, but the team was just really scrappy and always made it work. And I think kind of looking at Witty's background, just to give like shout outs to like the visual designers who worked really hard to figure out even how to make hero augments work. We were not sure how that was even going to happen. So give it a shout out to them, all the engineers on the team, all the teams that don't get as much love in FaceTime that deserve that love, like UX, and we have so many folks on the team that just do amazing, insane work. So just want to make sure that they'll get a good shout out.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it much, but holy, the level ups in terms of art this set and across the whole year. We didn't talk at all about chibis and chibi finishers, but that was I think an incredibly like hype thing that came out of this year.
No, you're right. So we completely brushed over. And we have real quick. We can't brush over that. Yeah, the chibis and the chibi finishers have been very, very good. And I think one of the public-facing rumors with TFT was always that like players were good, but it was never this like monetarily successful game. I mean, chibis have definitely helped in that area. Like, there's a reason the game is going to be outgrowing, and like, we always say TFT is a business. You have to make money. Like, the team did a great job, and we're doing more of that now, and that's important. So it's why we get to keep making fun stuff, and it's why 2023 has some. So that is a great call out, Witty. We should definitely mention the hard work of the cosmetics team and the cool stuff, and why they're going to make Chibi Malzahar next, and it'll be great. Wait, what?
Only in your dreams, Mort. Only in your dreams.
I own like every piece of Riot merch. I have zero Malzahar merch. You know why? Because Malzahar's not a popular champion.
This is why you have to like already like me. You get everything you could ever
Yeah,
want,
gee, look at you.
and more.
I love Akali. Give me all the Akali work. Yeah, all right. Cool. So we kind of interrupted you. Any other shout outs on your end, Alex?
No, I just wanted to give a shout out to the artists,
Yeah,
the partner teams that we have, like comms and localization. Like it's an insane team effort across Riot to get TFT out. So I just want to give a ton of love to those folks.
Yeah. Well, you took mine because I always do the thank you to the team. Even though there's 3 of us on camera here, there's a lot more behind us, and now it's a lot more. So we're getting to the point where if we made an end credits, it would be like one of those AAA games where you're sitting there for 10 minutes, where you're just looking through all the names. It's starting to get that big, so getting pretty crazy. And yeah, kind of like Witty, it's hard to believe. So more than half my time at Riot now is TFT. Like I've now been on TFT more than I was not on TFT, and that's mind blowing to me. We're going to be talking about the 5-year anniversary in a year and a half. Like I don't know, man. It's an illusion. So another year done. I'm pretty proud of what we accomplished this year. Knowing what's coming, I'm going to be even prouder, and I can't wait to talk about that stuff because it's also been a long time coming, so that'll be fun. Futureland is looking pretty great, so yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it from us. Have a good rest of your holidays. Enjoy your ranked climb. Next patch is January 11th, and enjoy TFT, and we're going to get back to resting so that we can work on Futureland in 2023, and yeah. All right. That's going to do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.